Greetings, fellow traveller. Tired of the hardships of your journey? Here, take a seat by the fire and let me spin you a grim tale of a dark future where there is only war. Today we're going to have a look at a fragment of the Master of Mankind where the Emperor himself tells his Custodes Ra how he sees the future. So yeah, this video will contain minor spoilers of that book, and also we'll get into some minor spoilers of some books at the end of the Siege of Terra series. So if you don't wish to be spoiled, this is your one and only warning. Foresight is a tool wielded by many in Warhammer 40,000. Many psychics have premonitory dreams or can glimpse possible futures. Eldar Farseers are very skilled at unraveling the skein of fate to contemplate the path that will lead them to victory. Even Siege himself tries to master fate, but not even he knows what the future holds. And let's just say that his little experiment with Kairos didn't really work out so well for him, to be honest. It's no mystery that so many try to glimpse what the future has in store. With such knowledge, one can overcome almost any obstacle, or at least one would think so in principle. In reality, however, contemplating a possible future and seeing it come to fruition are two very different things. And precisely that is what the Emperor explains to Ra in this very interesting conversation about his foresight powers. So, without further ado, let's dive into the lore and have a look at how the Emperor sees the future. As many of you may know, Ra Endymion was the last remaining tribune of the Custodes in the war in the Webway, and he often reported to the Emperor about the progress of the war in different sessions, let's say, where the Emperor mentally contacted Ra through different visions. In one of these telepathic conversations, Ra questioned how the Emperor wasn't able to see the heresy coming. If he could see the future, how come he didn't foresee this? The Emperor, seeing that his Custodes was questioning him, tried to enlighten Ra. Ra and the Emperor stood alone on a rocky shore, ankle deep in icy salt water. They faced a great cliff, reaching up hundreds of meters, sheer in many places, sloped in others. Even as Ra stared, loose rocks clattered down its surface, splashing into the rising water not far from where they stood.
"Where you stand now," the Emperor said, "is the present. Do you see the top of the cliff?
Of course, sire.
That is the future. You see it. You know what it is. Now, reach it."
Ra hesitated. Now?
"Climb, Custodian. You questioned the nature of my foresight. I'm granting you an answer."
Ra moved to the rock face, looking over the stone, finding his first grips. He tested them, finding them strong, even against the weight of his armor. The weaker ones he avoided. Less than 10 heartbeats had passed when a rock cracked and crumbled in his gauntleted hand. Ra skidded, arresting his fall by clutching at the stone. Another gave way, sending him the last few meters to the rocky ground in a breathy cloud of white dust.
"You looked for places to safely grip,"
said the Emperor.
"Yet you have already stumbled. You did not know the stone was weak."
It looked strong. The Emperor smiled, and it was by far the most unpleasant sight Ra had ever witnessed. Emotion painted across a human face, as false as the grotesques at any masquerade.
"Yes, it did, and you only learned the truth too late."
Right, so let's stop here for a moment. In a nutshell, this is the Emperor's power of foresight. He can see a possibility, such as the ascension of the human race into a powerful psychic species, free from the depredations of chaos, but he can't see how to get there. The stone that breaks on his climb could be Erda scattering the Primarchs, it could be Angron mutilated with the butcher's nails, it could be Lorgar worshipping him as a god. A myriad of possible things that can go wrong at any time and make getting to the contemplated future impossible. In my opinion, this humanizes the Emperor somewhat more and allows us to understand that he is not omniscient. In fact, just before this fragment, that is exactly what the Emperor tells Ra. He could not predict everything. The future reveals itself to him in possibilities, futures that if you work in a certain way, you might succeed in making true, Or, on the other hand, you might fail after taking the first step towards it, and then that possible future vanishes and will never come true at all. Another thing I wanted to mention is that smile of the Emperor that disturbed Ra so much, as if the Emperor was trying to reflect a human emotion in an artificial way, as if it were a mere facade for Ra. This implies that the Emperor is very detached from humanity and has to fake the most basic emotions so that the humans around him can see him as human. This could also mean that the Emperor is not really a human, but something else. Maybe something artificial created during the Dark Age of technology, or something else entirely. But also keep in mind that the author of this book, Aaron Dembski-Bowden, is a big fan of chaos, and let's say that he doesn't make a very positive interpretation neither of the Imperium nor of the Emperor. So for me, this disturbing smile simply means that the Emperor is above basic human emotions, and in order to not appear cold and inhuman, he must imitate or simulate these humans' emotions before his servants and vassals, even in front of his custodes. Although this uncharitable interpretation of the Emperor contrasts with the most recent depictions of the Emperor having emotions, like in The End and the Death Volume 3, where, spoiler alert, the Emperor amputates his emotional core before confronting Horus, discarding his hope, love, and grace among other emotions, because if not, he might hesitate to kill his own son, or he would hate himself for it after the deed was done. So, as you see, depending on the author, the Emperor is an incredibly emotionless and distant being, while he can also be a loving father who has to amputate his own love for his son in order to kill him. Anyway, with this out of the way, let us continue with Ra and the Emperor's conversation.
Now climb.
Ra hesitated once more, a hesitation that bordered upon defiance, as if such an action were even possible for one such as he in the presence of his master. "It is not necessary, sire. I believe I understand now."
Do you? Look out across the water, Ra.
Ra returned to the Emperor's side and did as he was bid. The water rippled in sedate waves, sloshing around the rocks that lined the shore. At the horizon's very edge, he could see the mirroring lip of another landmass. "I see another land. An island, perhaps."
It is Albia, many thousands of years ago, but that is unimportant. You see the shore. You know it is there. You know you can reach it by ship, or by swimming, or by flight. That is what you know.
The Emperor's dark eyes lost their focus. He faced towards the distant shore, but Ra doubted he was seeing it.
So you journey towards it, but all you can see is your destination. You cannot see the beasts below the water that devour travelers. You cannot know if the wind will blow and throw you aside from your course. And if the wind does blow, will it send you east, west, north, south? Will it shatter your craft completely? Perhaps there are rocks beneath the water, impossible to see until they grind and tear the hull of your ship. Perhaps the inhabitants of that far shore will fire upon your craft before you can make landfall.
The Emperor turned back to Ra, though curiously, his eyes didn't clear.
But you can see the shore, Ra. Did you fail to predict any of those possible flaws between here and there?
Perhaps I predicted them all, sire. Perhaps I factored in the possibilities of each one occurring.
Maybe so. And what of the eventualities you could not predict? Each passing moment is rich with 100,000 possible pathways. The craftswoman making your boat may suffer a heart failure before she can gift it to you, or she decides not to offer you the boat at all. You say the wrong words to her. You offer the wrong currency. She lies to you, for she is a thief. An enemy sabotages your boat before you set sail. You reach halfway across this channel of water only to see a more appealing coast to the east or west. Minute after minute, possibility upon possibility, path after path. All variables you are unable to see from where you stand at this moment.
The Emperor reached out as if he could crush the coast in his golden gauntlet. His expression was cold in its pale ferocity.
I can see the coast, Ra. I know what awaits me there, but I cannot see all the infinite vicissitudes between here and there.
At last, he lowered his hand.
That is foresight, Ra. To know 1,000,000,000,000 possible futures, and to be left to guess at the infinite ways of arriving at each one. to map out even one possible eventuality, taking into account every decision that every living being will make that will impact upon the others around it, would take all of the lifetimes that I already have lived. The only way to know anything for certain," he trailed off, gesturing to the distant shore, "is to reach the other side," said Ra. The Emperor nodded. "When the vault was attacked and the Primarch project compromised, should I have destroyed them all, or do as I did and trust that I would be able to restore them to grandeur? If I had destroyed them to prevent their abduction, would the Imperium have risen as it has done now, or would the Great Crusade have stuttered and failed without its generals? There are no answers yet, Ra. We are in the middle of the sea, beset by strange tides and unexpected beasts, but not yet thrown off course." "I won't fail you, sire." And so their conversation drifts to another topic and ends. But what we have seen already is quite revealing indeed. Apart from what we've mentioned earlier, I believe this part is the most interesting part of their conversation. The vast amount of unforeseen obstacles that can bar your way towards the desired future. The chance that maybe halfway on the path towards one future, you glimpse another more desirable one, and contemplating a trillion possible futures and having to guess the best possible path among endless numbers of paths to arrive at one desired future without any of your own actions or the actions of any sentient being setting you on another path or altering the future you desire. Also, the Emperor's foresight seems to contradict other forms of precognition that we've seen from Sanguinius or Conrad Kurz, which, contrary to the Emperor's foresight where the future seems more malleable and tied to the steps one takes towards it, the foresight of these two Primarchs seems to be set in stone, but that isn't the case either. At one point, Sanguinius did see a future where he defeated Horus, although most of the time he believed it was inevitable, that his death would come at the hands of Horus and none other, no matter what. That's why he fought so ferociously during the Siege of Terra, driving himself harder and harder to repel the traitor's attacks, since, as he himself put it, he wasn't going to die there. And sure, one could say that he didn't merely survive because his fate was already sealed. Maybe it was due to his military prowess, his unmatched combat skill, and his indomitable spirit. Or maybe him believing that he wouldn't die there gave him a faith in his own capabilities and survival that allowed him to defend against the traitors again and again. Although further on in the siege, right before the Anabasis assault on the vengeful spirit, Sanguinius confesses to the Emperor that he believed it was him that had to face Horus first for the Imperium to win, since if he didn't, he couldn't see any future where the Emperor was victorious. Furthermore, Sanguinius had grown to believe he could change the future he saw. He thought he could defeat Horus if he tried hard enough and thus change his fate, and this interpretation of his foresight powers does seem to align more with the Emperor's foresight. In Conrad Kurz's case, although most of his future visions were full of horrors, apparently he could also see several possible futures as depicted in his Primarch book that didn't end in horror and grim darkness. But maybe given his own pessimistic and grim worldview, Conrad believed that only the most negative of his visions would ever come true, and became tormented with the future of M41 and the horrors that would come with that dark age. So in other words, Conrad thought the future was set in stone. He believed fate to be unchangeable, and that mentality eventually led him to accept his own death at the hands of Meshen as an unavoidable fact. So, all in all, we could say that the foresight of both Primarchs does align with the Emperor's, only that maybe their precognitive powers aren't as strong as the Emperor's, or that the Emperor could see many more possible futures than his sons could. And going back to the Emperor's foresight, sure, one could kind of think that his foresight isn't that powerful at all, since he can't really see much, to be honest. Or I would understand if he might think that seeing a future and not knowing how to get there is kind of useless. In contrast, as depicted in the Path of the Farseer book, the Eldar Farseers can see the skein of fate and focus on its many threads to see what steps they need to take in order to reach the future they desire. Or at least the foresight depicted in that book gave more of a short-term feeling to it, where they seem to know how to arrive at the desired future and some of the steps they must take to make it come true. Meanwhile, the Emperor seems to be blindly guessing which steps to take towards the futures he can see.
And if this is the case, with the infinite possible outcomes and a numberless amount of unpredictable obstacles that can appear on his path, it's no surprise that the Emperor didn't see Lorgar's corruption after the burning of Monarchia, or that Magnus would bring an end to his greatest project, or that Erebus would corrupt Horus, and the War Master would rebel against him with 8 other Primarchs. On the other hand, maybe the Emperor did see some of these possibilities and counted on them. As we see in the short story The Lightning Tower, it seems the Emperor had planned for some of his sons to rebel against him or even fall to chaos. Although out of all of them, he never thought Horus would betray him. Maybe the beasts that he speaks of devouring his boat are metaphors of the Chaos Gods and how they scheme to twist his plans. Maybe the sabotage to his boat was a reference to Erebus, or even Magnus breaking the webway. Maybe the craftswoman was a reference to Erda and the scattering of the Primarchs. Maybe the other future he glimpses halfway on his journey is a possibility of becoming a god on the Golden Throne to better fight the Chaos Gods on their same plane of existence. And seeing that possibility, maybe the Emperor decided to row towards it now that it was impossible to arrive the first coast he saw to begin with. Maybe all of these possibilities are true, and the future he eventually arrived at on the throne was through mere improvisation while dealing with the unforeseen obstacles that arised. Or perhaps, on the other hand, these revelations the Emperor tells Ra are just lies intended to console him, while in reality, the Emperor had everything planned to the most minute detail. Personally though, I vouch for the first option. The Emperor saw an appealing future on a faraway coast. He then ventured towards it on his boat. But on his voyage, he had to cope with unforeseen sea beasts, a sabotage that would leave his ship damaged, and a strong wind that would push him towards a different coast that he couldn't even see. And now he was merely drifting around, trying to solve the many problems that arose. As the Emperor himself puts it at the end of the book, when his custodian asks him what he will do now, he only answers, "I don't know." Right, well, there you have it, the Emperor's foresight, which, just like him, isn't perfect. Also, before we end, I should point out that seeing a possible future and making it come true is probably one of the most difficult tasks in the galaxy, and only those of great power, skill, and wisdom are able to achieve such feats. Also, we have to point out the fact that the Emperor was fighting the Chaos Gods in his rush towards his desired future, and quite possibly the Chaos Gods had a great advantage since they had been planning for millennia even before the Emperor was born, scheming and planning for the heresy. Everything from the corruptions of Erebus, Lorgar, and even Horus. It was all planned in detail far before the Emperor even existed, and in the end, although the Chaos Gods didn't manage to kill the Emperor, they did achieve a favourable future for them, since in M41, the Chaos Gods have an unending flux of power thanks to all the suffering and the constant wars that swarm mankind on all fronts. Though, maybe, what they failed to foresee is that in this desirable future, the Emperor would eventually ascend into godhood, coming back from the ashes stronger than ever to seek vengeance and burn the realms of chaos with his righteous fury. Alas, all this is but mere speculation, and my suppositions are as valid as any other. So, what do you think?
Anyway, that's all from me for now. If you liked the video, you know the drill. Give a like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll meet again in the next video.